bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Renz, also known as Ricky Franz, and a great episode for you today. Another great doctor, another great discussion to share with you guys today. Today we have Dr. Andy Wakefield. I'm sure most of you guys know who he is. You've at least heard his name. He was a doctor who had nothing to do with vaccines, and he'll share the story on how he eventually became the face of the anti-vax movement. Now, much of his focus goes into documentary filmmaking, and one of his newer documentaries, 1986, The Act, or is it The Act 1986? Actually, I don't remember, but either way, it's a phenomenal documentary. As you guys know, I've been focused on this topic of medical freedom and vaccine safety for such a long time, and I've had so many doctors and different guests on to talk about this topic, and yet there's so much new information in this documentary. There's so much stuff that I didn't know, so many stories, so many historical events that I wasn't aware of, and I'll put links to his websites and the documentary in the show description. I highly recommend you guys checking it out. And of course, the last thing is, this is a value for value show. If you can financially support the show, there's plenty of ways to do it. If you go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com or rickyvrans.com, that's my new website. You can go to the support area where you'll find a PayPal account if you want to donate. You can donate crypto. I have a merch store. I have a Patreon page. I have a Rockfin channel if you want to tip any show that you enjoy. So plenty of different ways to support the show financially if you can. If you can't support the show financially, no worries. Rate, review, share the show, upload it anywhere you want. And thank you to everybody who's taken the time to review the show. I really appreciate it. And that's it, guys. Enjoy this conversation, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.
What is my perspective? Well, it kind of changes on a daily basis rather than the news about COVID. I came here in political and professional exile in 2004. And I came here because America had the ability to allow people like me to continue to conduct research on behalf of a disenfranchised and injured, a sick group of children who were not otherwise getting the kind of due attention they deserved. But it allowed it to be done in a philanthropic way. And what that meant is that America is very philanthropic, and the way that taxation is set up is that it encourages philanthropy. And that makes America very creative, because if you work within the system, a system which is now run by the pharmaceutical industry and medicine, for example, medical research, then you are constrained by what that pharmaceutical industry wants to do. Let me give you an example of that. When I was in the UK, my medical school, which was part of the University of London, which is the biggest medical school in the world, had entered into what was called a strategic alliance with GlaxoSmithKline, a huge pharmaceutical company. And for relative pocket change for GlaxoSmithKline, they gave money to the medical school, which the medical school thought was a huge amount. It wasn't at all. But that allowed the pharmaceutical company to have first choice of anything that came out of that medical school, any discoveries to exploit for commercial purposes. What that meant is that GlaxoSmithKline controlled not only the research that was done, but the research that wasn't done. And so they didn't like my research because it directly called into question the safety of one of their vaccines, which stood to cost them a fortune in terms of litigation. It came about because they had failed to do adequate safety studies and had made gross assumptions, and they got it wrong, got it very, very badly wrong, and a lot of children have been hurt. But they were able to stop my research. The medical school didn't care that it was infringing on academic freedom. It just wanted this stop because, it was making money at the back end of the deal. The front. So I came to America, and America still had a system of philanthropy that allowed for private institutions to conduct research, which still had an impact. And that allowed people to be creative. If you work within a system like medical schools, like the Mayo Clinic, it's very, very difficult to be creative. It's very, very difficult to do anything that's truly innovative if it's not in line with what the sponsors of the medical school, in other words, the drug companies, want. And so, sadly, that same situation has crept into America. And American private research is now very, very much more difficult to do or to actually make meaningful, because the pharmaceutical industry has become so powerful. And that needs to change. And what made them powerful is the fact that the government took away liability for damage done by their vaccines in 1986. And once they had no liability for damage or death for recommended vaccines on the childhood schedule, then they had a mandatory market. Children had to get vaccines to go to school, and they had no liability, no downside. So all they could do was make a massive, massive profit. And they did. And they expanded the vaccine program dramatically because there was no downside for them. They've shortcut safety studies, as we've seen with COVID. They rushed to market, they made a fortune, and they continue to make a fortune. And that allowed them to buy everybody, to buy the politicians, to write policy, to buy medical training, to buy doctors, to buy medical journals, to control the narrative, to control the editorial, to buy the media, to buy virtually everything. And that is a very, very dangerous situation. And that's where we find ourselves right now. So my feeling has changed from when I came here in 2004 and was truly embraced the idea that we could continue this work in the interests of children, preventing further problems, treating the problems that had occurred, to the current situation where I've become a filmmaker in order to convey to the public just the sense of urgency about what has gone so horribly wrong.
Yeah, and your documentary, 1986, The Act, I highly recommend people checking it out. I think I might have watched it on Odyssey.com. I know that it's available on, where are the best places? Actually, let me let you decide what's the best place to watch it. Where would you recommend people checking out your documentary?
The best place to go is to the website 1986theact.com, 1986theact.com, and go there. And then you can stream it or download it or buy the DVD. It's amazing how many people still love DVDs. We sell so many DVDs. So yeah, go there, get it. You can also watch Vaxxed, which was the kind of movie that changed the world. That was the CDC admitting to terrible fraud, scientific fraud in the context of MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism. And our first documentary, Who Killed Alex Bordalakis. So those are all available at 1986theact.com.
Yeah, I've had Dr. Brian Hooker on. I've had Del Bigtree on quite a few times throughout the years, and also Polly. And I mean, the stuff that you guys are doing is so important. And I feel like this topic has always been a topic that has been near and dear to my heart. It only became more near and dear to my heart when I became a parent, and then I became, even more passionate about it, because before it was like, I would talk about these things, but I didn't have a personal experience. And one thing I liked about The Act, and it's been a while since I watched it, but I do remember it opening up with two parents, right? And they were talking about having a child, and it made me think of like every new mom and dad I know, this loving filled couple, and they're so excited about having a child, and then that topic comes about, right? And it's like one thing we haven't really thought about was like, oh, vaccines, right? Like we're all on the same page, and a lot of people that I know realize that maybe they're not on the same page about vaccines, or maybe they haven't really done their research, and it can split people up. It can cause an issue, but I think the other thing it also can do is a topic that everybody more or less thinks has been researched and everybody's kind of accepted this narrative. Maybe it can make some people do their own research and find these alternative perspectives because they're new parents. One thing I see from a lot of protests and rallies and outspoken people, they're moms, they're dads, they're parents, So I think that's a big motivation. Was that on purpose to kind of highlight that, that very personal dilemma that I think we all kind of go through?
Absolutely. We had, it was very interesting because they had a story about extremely complex legislation, litigation, and medical science. Now, you could have made a film and it would have put even your most ardent fan to sleep in 10 minutes. How did you narrate? How did you tell this story in a way that engaged people, that got them sitting forward in their seats, that made them want to care about this issue? And many of them thought they knew about it, and they really, really didn't. In fact, I didn't going into the film. I didn't know the true extent of the pharmaceutical industry corruption. But when I was at a fundraiser, a pop-up fundraiser in Hollywood, and there was a celebrity couple there. And they said at the end of my talk about the film, they said, we've got to get behind this film. We've got to get behind it. We've got to support it. And I suddenly thought, I know what you can do. You can be the narrators of this film. You, Mr. and Mrs., you can have the conversation that all parents are having around every table, every night around the world. What do we do about vaccination? Because these people say this and these people say the opposite. So what do we believe? And it was a way, and then the first thing you do is you make conflict. Conflict is essential to drama. And you have a situation which I see all the time, and that is where the mother says, in 95% of the cases, the mother says, there's something inside me that says there's a problem here. There's something not right. I need to understand this better. The husband just says, you're kidding. What about polio? And walks out of the room and slams the door like that's the end of the debate. I just won. What about polio? That actually solves any issues or informs anyone about anything. So start with that confrontation. They know they're going to have a baby, then they get into it, and he storms out, and she goes on that journey. She goes on that research journey, and she takes him along, and she shows him the truth about polio vaccine, the truth. So you start with that most vexed of issues. What about polio? And then the story unfolds, and she takes him on that journey, and reluctantly, he goes with her on that journey. And in the end, of course, he's even more vehement, even more outspoken than she is. And so that was the device for telling what was otherwise a very, very tedious story. It becomes alive, it becomes real, it becomes part of our everyday life, because we now, as the viewers, care about their outcome, because their outcome is our outcome. And so we want them to prevail, we want them to win. And so that was the device for the film. And when I said to people in Hollywood, this is the way I'm thinking of making this film, they said, you're kidding, right? You don't really want to do that. And I thought, yes, I do, actually. And so we did it, and it paid off. It worked. So
Yeah, well, it's a good technique because, like you said, you can have so much amazing information, but especially now more than ever, even somebody like myself who so much of the stuff I learned growing up came from documentaries, and now I struggle to watch them because we're so used to like instant satisfaction from our phones and constantly being distracted that the second something gets a little bit boring, you're like, let me look at my phone, or let me find something else to watch. So it is really hard to keep people engaged. So having a personal story helps a lot. I mean, comedians do it, right? You know, they're some comedians are known for, or many comedians are known for like telling jokes that people can relate to. So, and then everybody's kind of, you know, bumping elbows during the stand up, saying, "Oh yeah, that's us. Yo, that's like us." You know, it's like people like that because it's like they're telling your story. I've had Chris Bell on the show. He's the filmmaker who did Prescription Thugs and Bigger, Stronger, Faster and Trophy Kids, and that's one thing, one technique he also uses a lot. He tells those personal stories. In many cases, it's his personal story. He also did that documentary about kratom called A Leaf of Faith, and it's you know, I think that's one of the reasons why people like those type of documentaries, because it's not just like fact, 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 and then kind of, you know, boring narration, but you're going on a journey. It's telling a story, and you get to put some faces to it, and you can relate to it. And this topic more than ever is important. I give you so much credit because there's so many. I mean, so many people in 2020 and 2021, I think, got a little bit of a, probably not to the extent, but they could feel kind of like a similar experience that you went through in regards to how every piece of media demonized you. And you probably felt like, how do I defend myself when everybody's saying I'm crazy, and I'm fighting against mainstream media and all these headlines and whatnot. And in 2020 and 2021, a lot of us who were saying like none of this makes any sense, we felt like Annie Wakefield, because we felt like nobody believes me that like, but this is really what's going on, and you can't trust the TV and you can't trust the media, and everybody's spreading fear and trying to spread misinformation. And I mean, I could just imagine what you went through. And it's funny because I contemplated asking you to tell your story, and I'm like, I wonder if Dr. Wakefield's just sick, if he's tired of telling that whole story from the beginning to end. But in a way, you know, if people don't hear it here, they need to hear it, because I think too often people have said things like he's been discredited. Oh, he's this, he's that. And I'm like, well, do you know his story? Do you know what actually happened? So is that something that you still enjoy telling to kind of get the record straight, or is your own personal story something that you are a little tired of telling?
Well, you know, when I come onto a show that I've not been on before, like yours, where you have your own audience, many of them won't know the story, and it's only fair to them to just go through it briefly and say what happened, if only to allow them to take a look at it from another perspective. Because as you're right, they will have heard the mainstream media's take on this. And at the time, the cancel culture was unheard of. And this was really the beginning of it. But it was very different to the way it is today. Now we have a whole host of doctors, scientists, highly respected people, Nobel laureates coming out against the COVID vaccine. They're experiencing to some extent the same thing that I had back then, but it was very much, and I don't say this to, poor me, I'm not a victim of anything. I had a conscious choice and I made it, and that was it. But I was very much on my own, because it was me against GlaxoSmithKline, it was me against Merck, it was me against the American Academy of Pediatrics, it was me against the Department of Health, it was me against Rupert Murdoch and his son James Murdoch in News International. And so I was entirely mainstream. I ran a big research team at the Royal Free Hospital, part of the University of London, as a gastroenterologist, an academic gastroenterologist. And I was researching inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. And we were doing some fascinating and really exciting work. And then I think it was the 17th of March 1995, a mother called me and said my child was absolutely fine. He had his vaccine and then his MMR, and he had a seizure, and he was never the same again. The lights went out in his eyes. He stopped communicating. He stopped using the words that he learned. He was incontinent, and he descended into autism. And the reason I'm calling you, doctor, as a gastroenterologist, is that he has terrible gastrointestinal issues. I'm sure they're related to his behavior, his brain deterioration. And the doctors just completely dismiss it. They say that's just autism, get over it, put him in a home, have another child, forget about it. And it was appalling. And so we investigated these children, and I did so with some of the world's leading pediatric gastroenterologists. And for sure, the parents were right. The children had an inflammatory bowel disease, which, when we treated, led to amelioration not just of their bowel symptoms, but their cognitive problems as well, their autism. It didn't cure it, but it made a big, big difference. And that was the start of a fascinating journey. The parents were right about every aspect of what we of autism. The medical profession was wrong on every single point. And when that happens, you really need to pay attention to what the parents are saying. And that is a fundamental rule of clinical medicine. So I had a very simple choice to make. The dean of the medical school said to me, if you continue this vaccine safety research, it will not be good for your career. It's an overt threat. And in that, he was absolutely right. But that made me angry and made me twice as inclined to continue, because I'm just obstinate. I'm just like that. And I just thought, what do I do? Do I work for that child across the desk from me whose life's been destroyed, that family whose life has come apart as a consequence of something that should never have happened and was easily preventable and came about because of medical arrogance and incompetence? Or do I work for the pharmaceutical companies and public health policymakers? And the answer was a simple one. No, I work for that child. That was why I went into medicine. And so that was the course I pursued. And no, it wasn't good for my career. I was accused of all kinds of things, fraud and scientific misconduct, of abuse, of all kinds of things. And that's the way the system deals with dissent. We can destroy you, and we will. If you threaten our bottom line, if you threaten our profitability, if you threaten our policy, we will destroy you. And you can either be destroyed or you can fight back. Not on their terms, not in their arena, not in the mainstream media. You fight back by finding another way to continue the work that you set out to do. And that's why I became a filmmaker. So you will read all kinds of stories about me and Wikipedia in media that they control. You cannot edit the Wikipedia page about Andy Wakefield. You can't go in there and alter it, correct it. It is locked down forever because that is something that is under their control. And that is what they do. So forget about it. It doesn't matter. Go around it. Do something that is creative, that is positive, that is, that is for something, for vaccine safety, not anti-science, not anti-vaccine, but for something, for safety, for parental choice about what goes into their children's bodies. And you would take a different approach to it, very much more positive approach. And there is life. There is life after this. You know, whatever happens, you can find a way through, you can prevail. And what was a handful of people then who were prepared to speak out about this, or parents of vaccine injured children, now numbers tragically many, many millions. But the upside to that, and the upside to COVID, I suppose, if there is one, is that it has woken so many people up to the issue of vaccine safety. So virtually half of this country will not get vaccinated. That makes them, in the eyes of the mainstream media, anti-vaxxers. What does that mean? That means that our side of the equation, the vaccine safety aware side of this equation, have won. We have prevailed. And that is why there is such anger, such vehemence on the part of the vaccine manufacturers and the regulators, Tony Fauci and others, to try and force people to get vaccinated, because they cannot do it through a process of education, of logic, of appealing to people's common sense, because people know the truth. People know that there is a problem, and they have never been more aware of it than they are now. So they have lost. And what people need to do is to understand that their united voice is prevailing. That the people coming together and saying, no, we're not going to play by your rules anymore. You've lied to us. You told us we would get our lives back after 2 doses of vaccine, and now you're going to shove another dose of the vaccine into us, and that's going to be every 6 months or every year, and it's going to be multiple vaccines for multiple strains, and we still have to wear masks. You are kidding. And people have woken up to that now and are waking up in greater numbers. And tragically, a lot of people have been hurt, but we have brought this on ourselves. People like Tony Fauci, the pharmaceutical industry, have brought this on ourselves and brought this on people. And it's tragic, but it is a real wake-up call to so many people.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think if there is any positive light to all this, it's the fact that people who have never once questioned vaccines being safe or any other agenda behind even the narrative the vaccines are safe are now waking up to that. And it's more obvious than ever, I think. I mean, how do you not see that they're forcing something that is experimental? There's no long-term studies. I mean, they're mandating it for workplaces. And they don't care if you already have the antibodies. They don't care if you've already been exposed to the virus. They don't care, and then it's going to be endless, because now you get people who, like you said, got vaccinated, and it's like, well, 2 vaccines is considered fully vaccinated. So now you don't have to wear a mask, and you can go in everywhere if you're in New York. But now they're recommending a booster shot. So that means 3 vaccines is going to be fully vaccinated. 2 vaccines is going to be meaningless. And it's just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And it's never ending. And it's like people need to put their foot down and finally say enough is enough. Like, we're not going to keep playing this game. Do you think that the more they push it, because I've seen people who were even for getting the vaccine now saying, screw that booster shot. Like, now they're pushing it. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to keep getting this shot. Do you think that they're almost pushing their luck? Like, they just keep forcing it to the point that even people who were kind of on their side are now getting upset about the fact that it's like, this is going too far. You're mandating it everywhere. You want to, people are openly asking me about my personal medical records, which is something that was never accepted before.
Yes, I do. I think the people are absolutely fed up for a variety of reasons. One is that they were lied to. It was the experts say, and the experts got it completely wrong. And in fact, I think every decision the experts have made in this entire episode have been absolutely wrong, showed a fundamental lack of understanding of viral behavior, how viruses react within an environment like a sort of global pandemic, but also the withholding of treatments that we know are proven to be safe and effective, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. Why did they do that? Why are they stopping people getting those treatments when they are shown in the literature categorically to produce not only protection against infection, but amelioration of disease? And yet people are being allowed to die in the interests of a vaccine and vaccine-only agenda. And the answer is very simple, is that they would not have got emergency use authorization if there were a proven treatment. And so that had to be crushed. Didn't matter how many people died, that had to be squashed, had to be crushed, because Tony Fauci said so, because his pharmaceutical industry sponsors said so, and that's the way it's been. And it's an utter disgrace. And people are really, really waking up to that now. And so it goes on. And then what they were promised has not occurred. They've not got their lives back. They won't get their lives back. And sadly, every time we put a genetic selection pressure on the virus by vaccination, then we encourage the evolution of new variants. Now it's the Delta variant, then it's going to be the Lambda variant, and then it goes on and on and on. The pharmaceutical industry see this as a cash cow. Let's make a new vaccine against the new variant. And it's like the antibiotic resistant bacteria, exactly the same story. A medical miracle, antibiotics, as they were when they were first discovered, rapidly became a nightmare. The public health officials now describe it as the post-antibiotic apocalypse, because an imperfect vaccine encourages the emergence of a resistant and potentially very dangerous bacteria. That is exactly what's happened. It's happened for bacteria, and now it's happening for viruses in exactly the same way.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. And the worst part too is that, like you said, so many people have been injured, so many people have been hurt by the vaccine, and healthy people, healthy young people who are at very little to no threat of the virus, and yet they're recommending them getting vaccinated. I mean, why do you think there's so many people that are? Do you think it's just been years and years of conditioning the public, and really almost scaring people into speaking out against vaccines because it's doesn't, as you know from your personal experience. I mean, you literally were just helping. Uh, I mean, you had nothing to do with vaccines. You were just helping parents figure out their issue. You saw. I mean, this was all just information that you found during, just observation, and yet you were quickly labeled an anti-vaxxer. And I think it was Robert Kennedy Jr. who says it's like if I'm trying to prevent chemicals in the water, or do you call me anti-water or anti-fish? Like I want safe water. I say the same thing about peanut butter. I'm like, if I tell you that peanut butter harms some people, does that make me anti-peanut butter? It's like vaccines are the only topic that if you say anything, like there's such a strong dogma to it that if you say anything negative about them, you're immediately labeled anti-vaxxer.
Oh, this is a sort of a K Street bullshit, frankly. This is just what they do. They sit around a table in some public relations office being paid a fortune by the pharmaceutical industry and come up with these names. Hey, that's a great name, anti-vaxxer. Yeah, we'll use that. Put it up on the board. Yeah, and that's what they throw out there. That then becomes the label. Let's attach the label of anti-vaxxer to all of these people, these tin foil hat people, these kind of flat earthers. And that's how they behave. And they get paid a lot of money for that garbage. Is it true? Absolutely not. Does it make any difference? No. And are they ever going to stop using it? No. And so me saying I'm not an anti-vaxxer or Bobby saying I'm not an anti-vaxxer actually I would not even bother to do that because they're going to go on calling you it anyway. That's what the media do. The other one is conspiracy theorist. How many times have journalists in interview with me defaulted to the allegation of conspiracy theory within 30 seconds of the debate opening? It's like, I've got nothing else to say. I've got nothing of questions. I've got nothing else to throw at this guy. So let's call him a conspiracy theorist. What does that mean? So, well, I tend to deal with fact rather than theory, but yeah, let's go from there. I'm not prepared to play on their playing field anymore. It's a waste of time. We don't need to. We don't need to because people have woken up through other mechanisms, through their own intuition, their own exploration, their own research. And now a great many people have come round to the idea, not even the idea, the certainty that they have been misled by the mainstream and that they're not getting the truth.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that's why the censorship issue is something that I keep harping on, because even if people are skeptical what's going on, because let's be honest, like you said, most of the experts have been wrong over and over again. The information's constantly changing. They're constantly being caught in lies. If you're skeptical and you go online and look for information, like you said before, they're going to find a Wikipedia page that is locked and literally is lying about you. They find all these articles that are lying and labeled you. It's the same thing when I had Mickey Willis on the show. Mickey Willis, the filmmaker from the Pandemic documentary, same thing. I mean, they locked his Wikipedia page. I mean, what they did to Judy Mikovits, what they're doing now to Dr. Robert Malone, who I've had on too. And if he's not a valid voice in this conversation, then who the hell is, when he was a part of patenting the technology? I mean, it's so absurd. And then I think it was Atlanta, one of the websites who had a article about questioning if he was even a part of the patenting of the technology and stuff. I'm like, it just, people will cherry pick any information they want to get any outcome they want. And I'm hoping that the truth is just undeniable. I mean, I think many of us in this community, we do kind of feel good. I mean, I went to a school committee meeting yesterday in my hometown because I've been fighting for making masks optional, and it was nice to like have a conversation afterwards, after the school committee meeting, with other people that were there fighting for the same thing, and we could openly talk about vaccines, and I wasn't the only one questioning if it was safe or if it was effective or any of that other stuff. I'm like, holy crap, I'm not alone anymore. I'm not, like, there's people out there, and people are opening to this. And do you think it will open can of worms in regards to, because there's a lot of people, like I said before, who are new to the vaccine issue. Do you think this is now going to make them be much more open-minded to if vaccines that they previously considered safe are actually safe?
Yes, absolutely. And this is the basis of our new film that we're just about to start. People need to be walked across the bridge from what has happened to COVID and what they've learned from the COVID experience to the childhood vaccine schedule. People have thought, well, in the past, okay, so Merck are criminals. They're a criminal enterprise. Pfizer are a criminal enterprise. They've been sued many, many times and had to confess to their crimes. They're felons. And that's a fact. I mean, it's not something you're going to get sued for. That is a fact of life because they have committed terrible crimes in respect of other drugs. But it's almost as if people have believed that if you go down 2 floors and along the corridor to the vaccine division, suddenly they've discovered Jesus. And they wouldn't do that to children. Surely not. Yes, they would. And it's even worse. And so people need to, and people are beginning to understand that that is the case. And when they're walked across the bridge from COVID to the experience with childhood vaccines and see the same thing, then they are going to realize that not only have they been put in the firing line, but their own children have been put in the firing line as well. Vaccines are not a rite of passage for children. They are a way of the pharmaceutical industry making a great deal of profit, certainly in the current climate. So let me give you one example about safety that really perplexed me, and that is a physician from Canada came on a show the other day, and he's a vaccine developer, and he said, we made the assumption, the manufacturers of these COVID vaccines made the assumption that when they injected it, it would remain at the site of injection. What we've now learned is that it doesn't, that it goes throughout the body, and spike protein is found in high levels in places like the ovaries and elsewhere. And this is the basis of the pericardial and the heart muscle inflammation that is very, very serious and hurting a lot of young people and killing many as well. Now, here you have a vaccine that you intend to give to everybody on the planet. There is no room whatsoever for any assumption about safety. What entitled them to make the assumption that giving that injection would lead to it staying at the site of the injection? That is so mundane. It's childlike to even allow them to make that assumption. And of course, it was completely wrong. And by the time you discover it's completely wrong, it's too late. It's too late for billions of people. It's already gone elsewhere. So I find that absolutely appalling. It's reprehensible that they are allowed to conduct quasi-science in their own interests and forego all of those studies. Now, if they had done the proper animal studies in advance of giving it to human beings and said, does this virus, does this spike protein go beyond the site of injection and into other body tissues? That would have been a question that was easily answered, but they didn't. And so billions of people have been injected with this substance that has eluded the assumptions, defied the assumptions made by the vaccine manufacturers. Do they care? No, because they're all billionaires now. They've moved on. They've made their money. They don't care. They don't care about the longevity of the vaccine or the longevity of people or the company. They've made their billions. They move on. That's the way these people think.
So I'm sure you've heard the news of Pfizer being fully approved now. I haven't had the chance to look into it yet, but I know many others, like Dr. Robert Malone and a friend of mine, Jason Burmis, did a video on it, and some others in The Last American Vagabond. They're talking about how that's kind of misleading. Have you looked into that? And
I haven't. I've just started reading some stories about it this morning, but I've been so busy with this new film that I haven't had time to get too far into it. But I've seen the same concerns, that what is actually been licensed and what is going to be available to the American public are two very different things. You're dealing with two different vaccines. So if you're someone who turns up and you're told that you're going to get a vaccine that's now been licensed, but in fact you get a vaccine from another manufacturer which is not licensed, then if you're injured by that vaccine, you're not covered by the vaccine injury compensation program. So you go along with your injury, your neuropathy, or whatever you have, and say, I got this vaccine and I'm now injured. And they say, well, actually, the vaccine you got is not the one that's covered. It wasn't the one that was licensed, and therefore you're not entitled to compensation. That's the story that I'm reading at the moment. Truth will, time will tell whether that is the case or not. But it sounds kind of typical of the way the system operates to me.
Yeah, it's a little scary because that it not being fully approved was something that I was hoping that would help with push back in regards to mandating the vaccine, because I'm like, how can you mandate something that's not even FDA approved? Once we're out of a state of emergency, like how can you even justify pushing this onto the public? It's one argument we made locally at the school committee. And one attorney locally is making for towns in Massachusetts, this attorney Justin McCarthy, which I've been in some contact with, in regards to, he's making a really good argument that how can the state, if the commissioner, the education commissioner, whatever his title is, that has nothing to do with health, has to do with education and schools, how can he mandate masks in schools when his job has nothing to do with health? And now that we're not in a state of emergency, he wouldn't have any authority to do that. So I'm hoping really clever people find these loopholes and find these flaws in their arguments, because I mean, I've had, and I'm sure you've been contacted by many people too, I've had so many people contact me like, my job's requiring me to get vaccinated. Like, what do I do? Like, what are my options? I know Brian Festa from the CT Freedom Alliance, he's a friend of mine also, and he talked about, he's like, listen, don't quit. Just don't get, stick to your guns and wait till you get fired. And I know that if you want to eventually file for unemployment, you don't want to quit, because the employer can actually deny you unemployment if you do quit. So what you want to do is get fired, because in that way it means that you're not turning down work that your employer let you go. So there's like a little tidbit of advice for people out there.
Something that may be helpful to your listeners, and that is that on this very issue, up on our website on Team 1986, TEAM 1986, if you go up to the top right-hand side, you can download a letter to employers about mandatory vaccination. So if your employer is insisting that you get vaccinated or lose your job, you need to present them with this information, which essentially says, if you're prepared to take the liability for damage to me from this vaccine because no one else will, and of course, when they are presented with the liability, they won't do it. Why? Because their underwriters completely refuse to do it. And this happened with a case in Maryland of flu vaccine. So go and download that letter. It will be extremely helpful. And the act of coercion, not whether you ultimately have to get the vaccine or not, but the threat of coercion is a crime. It is a crime. And that is something that's very important to bear in mind. And James Lyons Weiler is putting forward a number of these cases. So if you have contact details for James, that's an extremely important approach, because you cannot be coerced. And the act of coercion is a crime. Doesn't matter whether it results in you being sacked or not. The very act of coercion is a crime. So please go to Team 1986 to get that letter for employers. I think people will find that very, very helpful. And also bear in mind that there is a legal recourse, and that is going to be through James Lyons Weiler's organization. You can get information about that.
Yeah, Dr. Jack's been on the show, and I'm a big fan of his. I've had him on my other show too, the Union of the Unwanted, and he's also hooked me up with a bunch of other great doctors. Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. Henry Ely were all suggestions from him. And actually, Dr. Henry Ely just televised, he called it COVID Con, and I helped him stream it last night. And it was about, basically, I think the subtitle was, your boss doesn't own your body or doesn't control your body, something along those lines. But the argument that they were making, which is a similar argument that many doctors, including Dr. Joel Hirschhorn and other great doctors, that you shouldn't be able to mandate this because you can't deny there's other treatments. And that's I wonder if we could expose that, because they did a great job. I think I forget who said it, that the best thing that ever happened to ivermectin was that Trump never brought it up. It's like it's kind of true. Like hydroxychloroquine became a political issue. It became like you're either for it or against it, and even the people that were for it were, I mean, people like myself. I wasn't saying that it was gonna, that it was a good thing. I mean, I'm anti prescription drugs anyways. I'm anti big pharma. Like I always say, go down the natural route first, and if you can't, then use prescription drugs as a last resort, in my personal opinion, because, worst case scenario, if you take some vitamins or herbs or teas, it's not going to harm you, so if it doesn't work, it doesn't harm you. And, but do you think that's a game changer? Because I know I've talked to some doctors and they think it is. If they can prove, because that was, like you said, demonizing all these other treatments, and you mentioned this earlier in the show, that demonizing all these other treatments was crucial to getting these vaccines fast tracked. If now you can prove to some case or in some extent that there are some treatments that might work, wouldn't basically this whole thing just kind of explode?
Absolutely. And this has been covered extensively by the frontline doctors, Dr. Peter McCullough and others, available on their website, and with all of the literature that supports the use of these drugs. There is no doubt that ivermectin is life-saving, that it is safe, that it is effective, and that it is far superior to anything that they've ever achieved with the kind of conventional medical approach of intubation, and certainly better than the vaccine. So yes, I can't recommend that too highly. So Dr. Peter McCullough and the frontline doctors.
Yeah, he was just on a couple episodes ago on my show, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And he said in the beginning of the show, he's like, I'm just going to give you fact after fact. And he's like, nobody will debate me because they know, they basically know he's right. And it's so true. That's why I have such a soft spot in my heart for people like yourself and people like Dr. McCullough and all these doctors that I've interviewed that that are willing to be outspoken and discuss these topics. And it was a topic that was so taboo, and now to see so many outspoken doctors on this specific topic of just vaccine safety, because that's the thing, like that's kind of what we're saying, and even Robert De Niro, you want to talk about stories that got spun the wrong way. I remember people talking about, oh, Robert De Niro, pulled that documentary Vax. I'm like, yeah, but did you see his Today Show interview when he told people to watch it? And he said that there's something there and everybody should watch it. And then the worst part is Today's Show got exposed for being obviously very biased on their views and opinions, probably thanks to Big Pharma and their commercials on Today's Show between segments. But it was quite obvious that I'm like, why are you grilling this guy? This guy actually has a child that could potentially be vaccine injured, and chances are the people who interviewing him didn't watch the documentary. He actually watched the documentary, and yet the story got spun that they pulled it, and because it was a conspiracy theory documentary or whatever it may be. And then when you actually watch the interview, you're like, wait, he said it was pulled because he was busy filming. As you know, as a filmmaker, it can take up a lot of your time when you're doing a film, and he didn't have an opportunity to watch it. And when he did watch it, he seemed to be stunned by it and recommended people actually watching it. And to me, like, it was a perfect piece of evidence that, like, nobody's reporting that De Niro's telling everybody to watch it, but everybody was reporting initially when they knew that when his film festival pulled the documentary. So it's crazy times.
It is. The great thing about when he did come out and say everybody should watch this film and make up their own minds, we shouldn't have done that. That was extraordinary. That had the effect that had worldwide, globally, on people's awareness of the film. It was one of those moments, those golden moments where censorship backfired. It was actually pulled because pharmaceutical industry related sponsors of the film festival didn't want it to play. And that's how it got culled. And the net effect of all of that was publicity you could never have paid for. You couldn't have bought that publicity. And so people became aware of vax who never would otherwise have been aware of the film. And it was dramatic. And so they've been they've been very quiet about the last film. They're not going to make that terrible mistake again, which was a joy for us, of course.
One thing we've discussed a little bit on this show, because I'm still kind of pondering on what exactly the end game is. You know, like is it is everything that's going on simply explained by saying it's about profit and power, or do you think there's something more?
I think there's something more, and I think it operates on various levels. And this comes from sort of 30 years of being immersed in this. One is that there are people who truly philosophically believe that vaccines are the best thing we've ever done and they cannot be called into question. Those are the sort of idol worshippers, and you'll never persuade them of anything. They'll go to their graves believing that this was the right thing to do, whatever the price for humanity, and however many were killed, we did the right thing. There are those who make a fortune out of vaccines, a great deal of money, and there's no question for many, many people, profit is the motive. People have asked me over the years at conferences, do you think there's a population control agenda going on? Are these deliberately intended to harm or sterilize so that we reduce the world's population? And I, for a long time, didn't believe that until I became involved in the Kenyan story about giving women of reproductive age a tetanus vaccine conjugated to human chorionic gonadotrophin, which led to a sort of adjuvanted immune response by combining it with the tetanus toxoid from the tetanus vaccine. It led to an exaggerated immune response that then rendered the woman infertile or aborted the current pregnancy. And that this was deliberate. I've read all the papers. It was a consequence of many, many decades of research funded by the World Health Organization to produce a fertility vaccine. And it was successful. They did it and they used it. And then you got into this vexed debate between the Kenyan government and the doctors in Kenya going back and forth about it's real, no, it isn't, yes, it is, no, it isn't. And we're currently putting together a film about that right now. And that's a very interesting story, but it has led me to reevaluate the entire situation and say, yes, for some, there is clearly a population control agenda. It's not conspiracy theory, it's a fact. And you can read all those facts in documents published by the World Health Organization themselves. So they're not shy about it. Beyond that, is there a deliberate attempt to harm people? Yes. I think that I've always said, and this has now, I think, been borne out substantially, is that this virus came from a lab. It was generated through gain of function studies funded by the NIH, funded by Tony Fauci, when they had been stopped in this country because they were so inherently dangerous. We know not what we do. We really didn't know what we were doing. And scientists raised this issue and said, you've got to stop this work. You're going to create a catastrophe. And of course, that's exactly what happened. For many people involved in that, particularly, for example, within the Chinese Communist Party, I cannot imagine that they were doing it for the benefit of America, that there was an agenda to develop bioweapons which could potentially be deployed. Now, did that virus get out of the lab by design or by mistake? We'll never know that. I don't think we'll ever know. But nonetheless, I think there was a motive in producing these gain of function enhanced viruses to do harm to other people. There was no benefit. There's never been any benefit to the human race for doing this kind of work, even though people dress it up as, we'll understand more or we'll be able to develop better. No, forget that. That's just pious hypocrisy and actually frank lie.
I'm losing you.
Sinister, naive.
Sorry, I lost it for a second. But I got the end of it. Yeah.
You've frozen a bit. Did you lose me?
I did lose you for a second. Yeah. I got.
Sorry, I know. It's just, internet's unstable has just come up on my. Maybe they don't want us to be talking. But,
It wouldn't be the first time they censored either you or I. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those things, the eugenics, just agenda, and all these things, for a long time, it was hard for people to grasp. Even the Bill Gates thing, right? I mean, he was on TV. Everybody seemed to trust him. Everybody seemed to like him, and then, people started finally getting a little skeptical of his motives, especially when he was talking about patents. And in many cases, he would talk about how the patents should be solely owned by the pharmaceutical companies so they can get all the profits and all this stuff. And it's like people start questioning, like, okay, your morals might not be as much of a concern as we thought it was. And obviously his links to eugenicists and his parents and whatnot. So I think a lot of these discussions, the pros. Oh, did I lose you? Oh, came back on.
I'm back live.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
No.
I can hear you. Yep. How's your are you my
Oh, you
free?
can. Sorry, but I guess we're at the yeah. Internet connection is unstable. Okay.
People have always wanted to rule over other people. I don't know why people seem to think that now those people don't exist.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think they clearly do. This is just a pattern of animal behavior that manifests in humans more than any other animal. But I think the good people outnumber the bad by a great deal. And I think that if people can wake up to this issue in time, then there will be survivors. In every great extinction event, 5 there have been so far on this, the geological history of this planet, then there have clearly been survivors. This is the only man-made one that we face now, but we do face an extinction event, the 6th extinction, and we do so at our own hands. So we can actually control. We can't control a meteorite crashing into the Yucatan Peninsula and causing an ice age, but we can control this one, and we have an opportunity to do that if we act quickly. And so, yes, it's interesting times.
Yeah, to say the
What an
least.
understatement. It doesn't matter how much hyperbole you throw at this or how many superlatives you use. Nature, life, every day exceeds your expectations.
Awesome. Let people. Well, you already said you referred to those URLs, so I'll put those in the show description so people can watch the documentaries. People can also go to Team. What was it? It was Team 19.
Team 1986.
1986. Okay, great. And thanks again for your time. Thanks for everything you've done throughout the years and bringing awareness to this topic. And hopefully we talk again in the near future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dr. Wakefield.